Welcome back. Which I keep saying welcome back, but I know you're just binge watching these all day Saturday and Sunday, which is great. I appreciate it. If you want to keep these going, feel free to send contributions to the budget. They'll go directly into the project, and we'll keep moving forward. But anyways, guys, today we're going to get more into the bodywork stuff. We're going to deal with the top rails of these pickup beds. We got a lot of damage. You can see I've already scribbled out down the sides and up the sides of the rails and everything, and I'll show you a little more in detail here in a minute. I've gone ahead and marked out all my dents, the main dents. What we're actually going to end up doing is we're going to straighten out the metal best we can, and then what we're going to do is we're going to just put a skim coat of body filler over that whole rail. That'll give us a nice wide project to work with, because when you've got as many dents as this has, guys, you're going to have filler from one dent running into filler from the next anyways. So you might as well just put it all on in one smooth coat. You can work that whole thing, especially on these particular bedsides where you don't have that much bedside there to actually work. You know, we're just dealing with a grand total of about 6 inches by 6 feet, guys. This isn't a big panel by any means, and this kind of lets us dip our toes in the water rather than getting into the middle of a door, you know, a big dent in a caved-in door or something. That's a lot to take on as your first dent. And so we're going to start small, you know, keep working, building on to what we've already done. You know, we did the tailgate a while back and didn't have to do any real metal work to that. Everything was very minor, and the heat from that grinder, like we talked about, pulled out most of that damage. So then just a little skim coat of filler. Today with these bedsides, we're going to have to do more than that, because we really only have, honestly, 1 or 2 real significant dents, I guess, in the top of either rail. There's not a lot of big deep damage, but there's a couple, and we don't want that much filler in that bedside, because, guys, this is going to be a work truck. We're going to be working over this, and it's going to get scratched and scraped up again. Hopefully we can find some rail caps and protect them a little better, but if not, that's fine. We'll deal with it. But we want to make a good solid repair on these panels, because this is going to be an area where you're working all the time. Every pickup bed out there that's actually used, you can see damage in the top of your upper sides of your rails from people reaching over, you know, trying to get that toolbox or cooler or whatever it may be out of the back end of your pickup. That's what pickups are for. That's why we buy pickups, is to be able to haul stuff in the bed. And what we're going to do is try to clean up some of that old damage. You know, again, this is a 20-year-old pickup, 225,000 miles. It's seen some work in its time. So we're going to undo some of that damage, and today we're going to just get into kind of how to knock out some of that metal and get it back to a nicer, smoother surface where we're not putting a bunch of filler in there. You never want a bunch of filler anywhere. Sometimes it's honestly unavoidable, but, you know, given your situations. But with this, we're going to try to do it right. And what we're going to do with these is, because we have good access to the back side, we're not going to need anything besides just a body hammer and a dolly. And honestly, guys, these are the 2 tools that I've knocked out. 99% of the dents in my career have been done with these 2 tools right here. They're very easy to use. You know, it's a hammer and a chunk of steel. That's all it is. We just got to figure out how to use them and how to use them together to get this knocked out. What we've got with these bed rails, though, is we've got a lot of access. So we can just use these pieces. We're not having to use, we'll get into actual dent pulling here in the future. Once we get into the cab, there's definitely going to be some dent pulling. And the biggest thing with dent pulling is it's better when you don't have access to the back side to be able to drive that dent up. You're going to have to be able to pull it out from the outside, and we'll get into that and a few different ways of doing that we'll discuss. But for what we're doing with these bed rails, for one, we're not going to have to knock out every single one of these, because again, the grinder is going to do a lot of that work for us when it's time. There are a few that we need to hammer up, and we're going to talk about how to do that. But for right now, I'm going to grab the camera and just kind of go over these bedsides a little bit. It's going to be hard to see in the light that I have for you guys and the camera to pick up what I'm really talking about. So I'm going to try to talk you through what we're seeing and what we're looking at and what we're looking for, and we'll go from there.
Okay, these are a couple of the bigger dents that we're going to have to deal with. They're just kind of showing up, but you can see I've marked out a bunch. If I can catch them, if you catch them in the light, some of these you can see okay, but most of them just don't show up very well. There, we caught a glimpse of that one as we went by. But for the most part, see that one right there? That's another one, guys. Most of these are going to just pop up with the heat from that grinder. And so as we're working these, keep that in mind, you know. But these right here, those are two that we're going to have to be able to raise that metal up so that we're not filling that whole thing, you know, top to bottom. This thing's probably close to a 1/4 inch below level at the deepest point of that. And we definitely don't want a 1/4 inch of filler in something, especially in something no bigger around than that is. That's going to be a lot of filler in a small area, and it will absolutely get knocked loose when we're using this pickup. So we're going to knock that out. The thing about what we're going to be doing, though, is we got to know how to use our hammer and dolly, and if the hammer and dolly is not working, we need to figure out ways to get that metal up. And again, dent pulling is one way. We'll kind of discuss that. It's not always the best way. The best way is going to be if we can just knock that loose, or you knock it up with a tapping it, because when we burn it on there to dent pull with that, we're also destroying the corrosion protection on the backside, and that's something that we've got to be mindful of through the whole process, guys. And we're going to go and deal with that when the project's done, but we also don't want to be making a lot of problems as we go. You can see the squiggle line down that whole side. That's just from being wavy, guys. That whole thing just needs addressed. And just a little skim coat of filler, and this thing's going to be looking better than new. So let's get into how to use that hammer and dolly and maybe do a little learning.
So when we're going to hammer and dolly this, the way I'm going to do these, because I can reach it with this, I'm going to actually knock it up with this end of my hammer. And when I'm doing that, I can hold that dolly basically right on top of that dent and hammer up. And what that's going to do, and I'm not going to wallop on this, guys, you want to just tap that. It's sheet metal. You know, if you can put a dent in it that easy, then you can bring a dent up that easy. So we're not going to be wailing away on everything. We're going to have a nice easy grip on our hammer. It's going to, you know, just kind of float around. But we're going to have access to this one, the inside one, that one that I was talking about being real deep, guys. That's the one we're going to have a hard time getting to that, because our hammer isn't going to reach that direction. Basically, it's our hammer is going to land further inside, even with it up against the inside, because of the way the bed's contoured on the inside. And you know, there's a couple inch lip here where that bedside bolts to, so we don't have 100% access, but we can do pretty good with where these dents are located. What we're going to actually do in a few minutes, though, I'm going to show you how to kind of cheat and drive that up without dent pulling, because like I said, we don't want to, especially up here, it's going to be hard to corrosion proof this. So especially once the bedsides are on, you're not going to be able to get up there with a corrosion protection. So we're going to, one, we want to make sure to protect that before we put those bedsides on, but two, we also want to not cause more damage up there. And so what we're going to actually do is cheat a little bit. I got a couple other, you know, body tools that are going to help us reach up in there and drive that up. Because if we can drive it up, I can get access and I can tap it back down. If it comes up too far, we can tap it back down. It's not going to be a big deal. We don't want to drive it up as far as it is down, but we can get it close and then deal with that. But when we're working this way, guys, you can actually just put your dolly right on top of your dent and just kind of tap. And the dent is going to come up. And like I said, you're not just really hammering on that thing. Now you can, if it's a bigger dent, you're going to want to kind of hold your dolly out around the side of it a little bit, because what you're also not wanting is you don't want any of that other metal that's already high enough. You don't want it coming up even higher. So you're going to just kind of want to watch it, kind of get your dent in the light just so you can actually see, and you'll see your hammer. I don't know, I may be coming out of screen, I'm not sure, guys, but you'll be able to see where you're hammering and see that metal rise up as you go. Hear that difference? That's because I'm right on the dolly now. When it's off to the side, it's got a much more hollow sound, and you can hear it solidly from that. And what's going to happen when you're hit right on that dolly, if you're really knocking the hell out of it, what you're going to end up doing is stretching that metal, because you're pinching it between the dolly and the hammer, and then you're going to thin that out, which is going to be, it's going to end up on a big panel especially, you're going to end up with what they call an oil can, where that metal will flop in and out, and that's because you've stretched it. And we don't want to stretch it. Now some of that will come back out with the heat of our grinder again. That looks pretty good with that one, guys. Now, because of the access I have, I got it just a little bit high in a couple places. I'm going to drop that up just a little more right there. But now, I've got just a couple little peck marks that are a little high. I can put my dolly under there, and with what I'm doing, I'm going to use the rounded side so that I don't have quite as much contact and I can control it a little better. I can actually set it up in there and press against that, and I can put my metal up where it needs to stay up with that dolly. And that's another thing, guys, when you're working a dent, if you can't get in there and swing that hammer, but you can reach your dolly in there, you can reach that dolly in and you can actually push it up with the crown of that dolly. Just hold it in your hand and put that directly on the dent. And if you can push up hard enough, and then what you'll actually do is bring down the other metal that you're bringing up with it, because what you're doing is you're pushing that dent up already, and now you just want to knock everything else down. And you're going to work around that dent, because that's where it's going to be higher. You know, your dent's obviously low, so we're going to tap around in the other area. And then when you let the pressure off your dolly, everything's going to stay right where you needed it to be. So we actually were able to push that dolly up using our dolly, or push that dent up, holding it up with our dolly, and brought that up without actually even having to hit from the bottom side. So now, because of the access problems I have with this one, I'm going to cheat just a little bit. And what I've actually got is just a 3/8 impact, or a chrome socket extension. Now I chose this one because it's got a nice round edge. There's nothing too sharp about it, because anything sharp is going to leave a problem, because you're going to see that sharpness here. But all I'm wanting to do with this, guys, is drive up the bulk of this dent and get it up to where I can then work it with what I can have access with. So if it comes up a little high, that's fine. I can throw my dolly under here and I can tap it back down. But because of where this thing's located in relation to the body lines inside, I just can't get this hammer in there. Now the other option is to grind it out, weld a pin in it, dent pull it. But again, you burn your corrosion protection off. We don't want to do that if we can help it. So we're going to just see how this works. Really don't have much to lose on this. So let's give it a whirl. Tell you what, guys, that did a lot of good. I mean, that's honestly, I could run a grinder over that, put filler in it, and I'm not going to feel bad. But we're not going to go quite that far yet. We are going to, now we can finish it out with just a little bit of hammer and dolly work. Before we grind into this, I just wanted to show you, these are the 2 dents. That right there is where we were at earlier, that we were 1/4 inch low. Guys, that's going to require almost no filler. And we honestly fixed that with a little bit of hammer and dolly, but the main dent removal we did there was with a chrome extension for a ratchet and a ball peen hammer. So much better. You know, that's the thing, guys, this stuff isn't rocket science. You just got to be able to get in there and problem solve, and you can fix a lot of stuff with just stuff you got laying around and some elbow grease. I'm really happy with that. So anyways, I've gone ahead and hammer and dollied everything that we need to hammer and dolly. Those were really the 2 main ones between both rails, but they're both hammer and dollied. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and grind these so that we can get ready for filler and get some filler on them. Alright, so we got this whole rail filled, and I know all this filler, you know, we're corner to corner, edge to edge here, guys, but the thing is, if you were able to fix those dents like we got in the tailgate, this is going to be even easier than that, because we're not trying to really work at just a spot. We can work the whole thing down to one level, and so we're not going to have to worry about, you know, so many edges and things like that, because it's all, we're working it as one dent. That's the advantage of doing it like this, guys, is you're not going to have that spot here and spot here and spot here that, you know, you may potentially see. You know, if you're not super experienced, those things are hard to hide. But like this is pretty easy, because we're just going to block it with one board, and, you know, we're going to use just some 80 grit on a hand block. The longer the block you got, the better you're going to have. I've got a shorter one. This is the longest one. You could also start with, say, an air file. Knock this down real quick. But this, you know, the new fillers nowadays, guys, they don't sand very hard. So we're just going to tackle this one by hand. Just a few tips here, and then I'll take over and just get it sanded and knocked out. But we're going to do this all as one thing. We're not going to just sand right here until that's flat, and then we're going to go here. We're going to do, you know, we want it nice long, and we want to just kind of keep moving. We're going to knock all this down kind of at one time. It's going to keep it to where we're staying nice and flat. You can already see, I don't know if it'll show up in the camera very well, but you can already see where we're sanding part of it, but the stuff that's not quite as high, we haven't touched yet. So all of this is going to be at one nice level. We're going to have one nice straight panel here when we're done. And really, guys, it's not going to be that much work. Going to be a lot easier, faster to do it like this than if we were dealing with every single individual dent. One thing you want to do, you're never going to really run your block straight back and forth. You always want kind of an angle on it. You want to kind of float across that. Just helps keep it from digging in one way. You know, no different than if, say, you were sanding by hand. If you do it like this, you're going to have 4 grooves where your fingers are. You don't want that. If you run it like this, everything can kind of float a little easier. Same thing with a block. And by the way, don't just ever use your hand as a sanding block. You're going to have ripples. But a good block, guys, is going to be pretty easy. And you're going to be able to knock it out. And you keep just a little bit of a pitch, and then you can come back the other way. Just kind of X across your panel as you're going. You're going to be able to knock that down. And like I said, we want to work as much of this at once as we can. We want to keep it all on one plane. And so we're going to just work our way all the way to this end. Knock everything down. Then once we get to where we're at down there, we're going to just head back that way. And again, guys, can't stress this enough. Make sure you're wearing a respirator when you're doing this work. I'm not, again, because it's easier to communicate, but those things are very important. You want to protect yourself. Make sure you're wearing glasses. Anytime you're going to run into contact with chemicals or sharp objects or anything like that, you want to wear gloves. Just take care of yourself, because you want to be around to enjoy the project when you're done. So I'm going to cut out here for a few minutes and go ahead and just get this knocked out, and we'll be back.
Real quick, this is where we sanded off. This is where we haven't reached that level yet. Mostly because as we're spreading that filler on, it's hard to smear it on one complete smooth level. So what we're doing is we're starting to cut through some of that, and you can see where we haven't reached all the way to the bottom. Once this is all kind of the same color, we'll check back in and I'll show you more what it should look like when we're all done here. Okay guys, this is our filler sanded. This is what it should look like. You see some bare metal showing through. That's because that metal was all where it needed to be. And we're really not that thick with our body filler. So anywhere where that metal is exactly where it needed to be is going to come through. You don't feel those spots. There's no rise. Now, if you've done some body work and you do have a spot, say this one's actually a high spot. What you can do now is tap that down very gently. You don't want to get crazy, and then just put a little more body filler over it. There's no reason you can't do it until it's right. Now, one thing, I don't know if I can get it in the camera, right there. Those are some pinholes in this filler. That is mostly a product of the area that we're trying to spread at one time. Those aren't bad, but they definitely need to be addressed. Very easy. Our skim coat of metal glaze is going to clean that right up. And that'll be the next step. Then once we knock that down real quick, and we'll sand that with 180. Again, this is sanded with 80 grit. And we're going to finish at 180 before primer. This is the right side, the passenger side rail here. We're going to finish with 180 before primer. Once we get that metal glaze on and sanded, guys, this is going to be ready for primer and move on towards paint. Again, guys, this is just one step, but we've done so much good for this pickup bed right here. So we got our metal glaze on, finished out with 180. We got the bed sides. They're ready now to mask and prime. One thing, again, you want to make sure in your stake pockets, around your edges, all the, up underneath here, you want to get in there and hand sand that or however, but you definitely want to get that stuff scratched up, prepped. You don't want to, if you don't prepare these, it's going to peel. And guys, it's easier to do it right than it is to do it twice. So just take the time right now. If you're just like, you know what, I'm over it, then go in the house, go chill out, come back in an hour, come back tomorrow, come back next week, whatever it is.
don't just half-ass it at these steps. These are the steps now. You want to do them right, again, because this is the stuff that's going to come back and bite you later. You don't want to have to do it again, so just do it right now. And if that requires taking a little time away, so be it. Whatever it takes to just do it right the first time. Those steps have to be done in order to put out a quality product. So just little stuff like that goes a long ways in the longevity of a paint job. So that's gonna pretty well wrap us up for today. Make sure to like and subscribe. Again, that really helps us, know what's going on there. So like and subscribe, and then go find a project and get nerdy.